Welcome to our show. Your show, our show.
I just don't know how to tell you this, Kelly, but I'll try to do it in a tactful way.
Okay.
That was a terrible intro. Today, we're going to talk about tact and just what it's all about, how we deal with it,
How to demonstrate it.
and why it's such an important building brick in your life.
Very important. So, tact is the ability to tell the truth in a way that considers other people's feelings and reactions. It allows you to give difficult feedback, communicate sensitive information, and say the right thing to preserve your. I can't say that word.
Say the right thing to preserve your relationship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. I guess the times you want to use tact is when you want to preserve the relationship.
Yeah.
I guess the times you don't want to is when you want to end it.
Or you could just be so frustrated sometime, like you could be so frustrated that it just comes out wrong. That's happened to me before.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or people take it the wrong way. I've been in instances actually where I've said something that I said tactfully.
Right.
And I said it smiling, but the person taking that actually took it as me being snotty.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I had to actually look back and be like, I still didn't see really what I did wrong, but I valued their opinion and I told them that I would work on that. Maybe they just need to be talked to a different way. So
Right.
Maybe everybody, you kind of have to change your tact for each person.
So yeah, I mean, I guess it all depends on how well you know the person, right?
Yeah.
And you're able to read those kind of situations. This is why it takes a lot of practice to be very tactful.
Yeah.
And to be able to know
big
how to
time.
read different kinds of people and how they take things.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes, I mean, as you start to get to know people, you start to see how they get really jumpy about things sometimes, like depending on the person.
Yeah.
And then others, they would be like, you could tell them anything and they won't even like flinch,
Right.
you know, like they would just take it all in and just be like, yeah, you're right, you know, and you don't really have to practice so much tact with those type of people, but it's a matter of practice, you know, you just have to get to know people and be able to apply consideration to it. And oftentimes because of that, people who try to be tactful sometimes end up not being completely truthful because they're trying to be tactful.
Right.
So have you ever wanted to say something, but then you really don't say it and you think that you said it, but the person didn't really get what you're saying?
Right, because you weren't direct.
Exactly, because you're trying to be tactful.
Right.
Right?
But in the end, that's not really being tactful because you've got to be honest and tell the truth
Yeah.
with what. That's what being tactful is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just actually listening to an interesting audiobook. It's called Outliers. It's by a famous author who I can't think of right now. But Outliers talks about stories of success. And one of the stories it talks about that illustrates the importance of culture and how people communicate was stories about plane crashes and what happened that caused those plane crashes that were often because of communication issues.
Yeah.
Right? And it came down to one story that really sticks out in my mind is the story of Air Colombia and this crew that was running out of fuel and they were needing to be able to make an approach. And what was happening was that the second officer, because of the way that they talked to each other, the second officer wasn't being direct. You know, he wasn't telling the truth to the captain in a way that really communicated the urgency of what it was he wanted to tell him.
Yeah.
And so because of these dynamics of the cultures in terms of how they perceive someone who's higher up than them, they would tend to change the way they communicate. So they wouldn't be as direct. And so he's trying to be tactful, right? Because he's a subordinate.
Is this in a panic moment?
It isn't in a panic moment.
Okay.
It's like the way it happens with these plane crashes, oftentimes it's like, you know, something's like it's that in this instance, they're running out of fuel. They know they're running out of fuel, but they're not really relaying the urgency of it. So when the first officer So when the captain told the first officer, tell the air traffic control, say we're running out of fuel, say it's emergency. And so he said like, so then he tells air traffic control, he goes, and we're running low of fuel, right? And just says that, but doesn't say it's an emergency.
Right.
Right. So because he wasn't able to so he was trying to be tactful because of his position, but in the end he wasn't being truthful, and and this is what led to like air crashes. Like suddenly they did run out of fuel and there wasn't enough runway, and then boom, they were gone. So
crazy.
So this is the kind of thing that Outliers talked a lot about, was this dynamic of how people talk to each other, right? And it has a lot to do with their cultural upbringing. And you'd be surprised, it's not just like their upbringing in their families.
Yep.
It goes back hundreds of years. Like it's amazing, like just how far back that cultural influence goes. And if we don't have that kind of experience like inbred into us, if we have a totally different experience. It's just something that happens with hundreds and hundreds of years of culture that gets into the way that people work and the way that people think. So being tactful, it's a challenge, especially for a lot of cultures where there's a hierarchy.
And you don't talk like that
and
to somebody.
you just don't talk. Yeah, and so it's a real challenge for people to develop this skill. It's an important skill because, as I just illustrated, it could have avoided disasters.
Yeah.
Not to mention that for people to be able to be direct, but then also be able to regard their superiors in a very, I guess, a humbling way, right? That could be very advantageous in terms of being able to make progress in terms of your career as well as in business.
I feel like a tip for that would be using like please and thank you.
Please and thank you.
Even if you have, or like just using your manners. So like, that's what I really try, because I find messaging, it's hard to be tactful in messaging because they can't hear the tone of your voice. So what you say could be like, yeah, like they could take it completely different. So nowadays we can use emojis.
Yeah.
With send a happy face. Be sure to say please and maybe even thank you in the message. That way that you're coming off, I don't know, polite, and they're not. I'm thinking more along the lines of your story. So like, if they felt like, oh my gosh, I can't talk to this way to my superior, I felt like maybe if they used a please, or it would have sounded better and made them feel better about it. I don't know. Yeah,
but that's the kind of thing that, again, that comes down to just being skilled in terms of how you do it. Because if you water down like the urgency of something or the importance of something, then what happens is that person can just brush it off and not even really hear it.
Yeah,
right?
True.
So it's really, please and thank you is good, but and maybe that does show the reverence and respect that you're hoping to convey.
Yes.
At the same time, though, yeah, you got to be direct.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't really have anything to do with please and thank you, I guess, but
yeah.
If please and thank you can make you be more a direct person, by all means, I think somebody should use it. So do you think that tact strengthens reputation and builds credibility?
100%. Yeah. So the people I know who are quite successful in business, and also people I've seen who are like successful in their careers, they're very good at being tactful and direct about what they want and about what's, about their work and what matters, right? So there's no leaving out, like there's no question when it comes to like what it is that they want and what they expect to happen, things like that. So they're very good at managing expectations, right? So that's something that is very lacking in a lot of other, a lot of people just don't have those kind of skills. Again, another reason why you want to develop your tact, right? So the more tact you have and you're able to communicate more effectively, the more people like that, right? Especially your superiors, and especially someone in business who's a client. When I have somebody who's doing contract work for me, for example, and I can find, and they're just very clear about what it is they're going to do. They do exactly what they say they're going to do, and these types of things. I'm just like, wow, they are the best, you know. Right. And so just doing that, it's just having that accountability for your words sets you apart. So in terms of like The credibility, yeah, 100%. Like it just, then then what happens is that you just feel confident in dealing with those people.
All right, some tactful scenarios. Your boss asks you to take on some of their workload so they can leave early on Friday. However, your schedule is full and you're not sure you'll get everything done on time. What do you think a tactful response might be?
So I'm the boss in that scenario. If I ask them something like that and they were to respond to me that they can't get it done on time, as long as they were straightforward and just said, oh, you know what, I'd love to do it, but yeah, don't put in but, because that just negates what you just said. So
it does.
I don't want to hear. I want to hear them say something along. I want to hear something along the lines of, I really appreciate that you're giving me that workload because I want to, I love to get it done.
Yeah.
The workload I have right now has me maxed out though.
Right.
So if there's some way that we can arrange it some other way, please let me know.
Right.
And just basically for them to come back to me and just be honest about what they have for the workload and what they can do and can't do, then I'm okay with it. Yeah.
So I'm gonna turn this around a little bit. Could the boss have been more tactful asking the employee in that situation?
Well, you haven't given me an example of how they asked.
I did. Your boss asked you to take on the workload. I guess not. So when I'm thinking that, I'm like, hey, so my boss comes up to me, hey, can you take on this workload? That's all I'm thinking they're saying. But I'm thinking maybe they could have came up and been like, hey, what's your plate look like? And maybe gone and talked to them a little bit before even asking.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that's why. I
yeah, that's what I do. I'll check and see first before I start introducing something.
Yeah.
Just if anything, out of respect.
Right.
But at the same time, there's no sense in stressing someone out like that. If they are really like.
I enjoy that stress though.
What? But I mean, all I do, if I'm not asking, what's your workload look like right now before I introduce this, then all I'm doing is like introducing a scenario where I'm giving you an opportunity to let me down. Right?
Yeah.
And that's not a good opportunity. It's basically putting you in a situation where you're having to say no to me and it looks like, you might start thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, he's going to think I'm lazy or something. Or, oh my gosh, he didn't believe me when I told him, or something like that, right? And it just goes through people's heads and then they're just like, why? So using some tact and just like the boss should be approaching it in such a way, just like, hey, how's your workload doing today? Just be like, oh, I'm swamped, but I'll be able to make it. And then if that's the answer, then I should be like, yeah, just not going to answer.
I hope just not going
to ask the question.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So okay, that's fantastic. Hope you have a great weekend, and that's the end of it. But if I didn't ask and I went and asked, then you have to tactfully respond to me and in a way that lets me down. So let's see it. Let's hear it. What are you gonna say?
Me?
Yeah, go.
About what?
This.
Sure, no problem. That's what I would say.
And then you don't get it done, and then I'm disappointed, and you let me down.
No, because I would probably work
You
late.
said you would get it done. Yeah.
I know. That's I don't know. I feel like I would probably, as long as I wasn't busy, I would either work late, get it done on the weekend, or I'd just say, hey, no problem. Is having it done by Monday at 8 a.m. okay? Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
That's kind of probably the response I'd give. When do you need this done by? Okay, yes, I can get that done by this time. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because I would want to help them.
Right.
I'm just that person. So.
Right.
And I don't mind a little extra stress because it puts the knife in my butt.
Puts the knife in your butt.
Okay. Okay, scenario number 2. One of your team members is regularly late for work and it affects their performance. After another missed deadline, you're tempted to call them out at the staff meeting. Although this might make you feel better in the short term, it's insensitive. What would be a tactful approach?
So definitely a more tactful approach is to just basically talk to them one-on-one and say, hey, I've noticed that for the past week or so, you've been late, whatever it might be. Right?
Yep.
Just say, hey, I've noticed you've been late lately. What's going on?
Yeah.
Why are you not coming on time?
Yeah.
Right. So that's the approach I would take. I think that way, of course, they don't have any embarrassment. And you know what? You just don't know. like
what's going on in their life.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You just don't know what it could be, and it could be anything, right? It could be something that's just temporary. It could be something where there's like a running issue, but being able to open that up and have that dialogue, that's what matters. So you want to give them the opportunity to be able to tell you in private. Why you would want to do that in a group setting?
Maybe because you've had enough.
Yeah, I think that would be a show of frustration.
It would be a show of frustration.
It might also be because the rest of the staff are frustrated about it, because oftentimes sometimes people don't think about the fact that they're part of a team and that everybody is there, trying to move things forward
and if the
trying
rest
to be.
of the team's there at 8 a.m. every day.
Yeah, they get frustrated
Yeah,
when they see others
yeah.
that don't, right?
Yeah.
And so they feel like, like, well, why isn't this guy doing this? And, and then they feel like they need to have answers for why they're not showing up on time.
Yeah.
Right? So even though it's not even their place,
Yeah.
right?
But then again, do the other employees, maybe that employee who is late all the time is staying late all the time? Do the other employees know that that's going on? It's kind of, yeah.
So how do you tactfully tell somebody like that? Again, it comes down to just simply being sensitive and being considerate and just taking a step back, humanizing them, life happens.
Yeah.
And then just be like, what's going on, because I've noticed this, and what is there something happening?
Yeah.
And then just
I
see
think
what it is.
Go into more detail with that. As like a business manager, owner, whatever you are, like if you're the person talking to this person who's late, I think starting off like with a gentle approach, it would be a great idea, but also you kind of gotta, if this continues happening, there's like, here's a written warning, here's a verbal warning. Like, I think starting off with the gentle approach is a great idea, and maybe that being like the verbal communication at first, but if it continues happening, I don't know, you have to be tactful. Like, it's the truth. This person needs to be to work at 8 a.m. So you can't,
right.
That's kind of jumping around the bush almost, being like, not jumping around the bush, but just doing gently and asking what's going on.
Right.
I feel like that's not being tact, because you as a business owner need them here at 8 a.m.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then you have to be stern or whatever, tact.
So depending on whatever it is they say, the response has to be, well, this has to change.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then going on to that, so if it looks like it isn't, like you're saying, like it continues to happen, you just have to say, look, this needs to change, otherwise you're going to get into progressive discipline.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And then that's kind of like, well, what does that mean? And it means, well, we're going to start documenting all of this and writing you up on these things, right? And
that's the hard tact to say, because you don't want to say it.
That's the hard thing, because it depends again on the person.
Right. And what the situation is and what's going on.
If some people might take that as like, oh no, I better shape up. Other people might take like, oh, you're threatening me. Well, screw you. I'm going to go ahead and just go against that. Some people react differently to that, right?
Millennials.
So it just depends on who you're talking to, on how you want to frame that, right? So if it's a matter of, so you do want to say that, like, look, this has to change. You got to be clear about that. What are you going to do to change it? Give it a framework. Give it a time frame, even if you need to.
Yep.
Right. Just say, okay, starting now, from now until this day, you're going to start X, Y, Z, depending on what the situation was, right?
Yeah.
And just give it a lot of detail around how things are going to go. And then if that doesn't work out, then come back to it and go, look, we got to start introducing progressive discipline, because you said you're going to do this, and you're still not doing it.
Yeah.
So now we got to do something else, right? So all of that is tact that has to be implemented. And now we're talking about job scenarios, which means that you now have to consider things like, what's the term? What's it called? Human resource.
HR?
Kind of HR kind of stuff, right? Where there's like all these employment laws and things like that have to be considered. And as an employer, you learn about all that, and you know about all that.
Yeah.
So you always have that in the back of your mind as far as as you're doing things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to be tactful in that sense. You got to make sure that everything that they what am I saying? Everything really the focus.
HR makes you have to be tactful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes it's actually very stifling.
Yeah.
You know, like because you have to be so careful about the words you use, suddenly it's like you're not being completely honest. And it's just like you're frustrated by being held back, right?
Exactly.
So the truth is that you really, being tactful is a very delicate art. And I think that the more you practice it, though, the better you get. You got to get to know people really well. And the more you have conversations, like when you're working with others, the more conversations you have them, the more you build the trust, the more you get to understand how they communicate, the better you can be tactful with them. But if you don't really know them, then sometimes even when you try to be tactful, you're actually just fumbling it. You can't, you just don't know them well enough to be able to deliver. Even though you're implementing everything you know from your experience, they just might take it a different way. Right.
Before we end off this episode, I'm just going to give a little example of like, I have some management experience ever since I worked at McDonald's. Anyways, that is something I find I am more tactful when I am frustrated. Once I've had enough and I'm like, okay, and that's the thing. I need to work on it like all the time, not just when I'm frustrated. So when I get to the frustration part, I'm like, okay, I'm not hitting people, by the way.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, now's the time. Like things need to be done, but why wasn't I doing that when things were calm? Like why wasn't I doing that before? Why did I get so frustrated? And why was the frustration is what gave me tact.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
So you just waited until things got so bad that you got so frustrated that you finally spoke out.
Yeah, and finally, this is more going in like me previously, I like beat around the bush. Hey, can you do this? Like being nice and kind and not having the assertiveness.
Right.
And the truthfulness.
Right.
Like, hey, that actually wasn't good.
Yeah.
But say that in a nicer way. But do you know what I mean? Like I really had to work on that, and just because I felt like I was maybe too nice,
right,
and I wasn't telling the truth, and I wasn't delivering the crappy news in the proper way. I was trying to what's that called?
Trying to sugarcoat
it. Yes.
Trying to sugarcoat it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's the complete opposite of tact.
Yeah.
Tactfulness. Tact. Anyways.
It's the opposite of tact.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So though we gave you a couple tactful scenarios. Oh. We talked about those. And our next episode will be how to be more.
We'll get into the how-tos of how to build your tact building brick.
Thank you for listening to Enter the Bunker. Make sure to follow us on Instagram where you can share your story and also look at behind the scenes of how we make our podcast. You can watch the video version of this podcast on YouTube by simply searching Enter the Bunker. Tune in next time as we launch into thriving.